Hey, what's up guys? Zach here, and I am back working on Lightsabers again. Now, it's been a little while since I recorded my last video, and in the intervening chunk of time, I took the opportunity to meet up with a good friend of mine who is, among other things, an electrical engineer. And working with him, looking at the project, thinking about it some more, I was able to make some good decisions about the direction I wanted to go and how I was going to make this project work. The other nice thing is he owns a couple of Ultra Sabers, which I don't have, and I was able to compare, look at how they're put together, look at the amount of light they put out, and really nail down exactly where I wanted this project to be. Now that's great news. That means that, in fact, a little bit later on, my goal is to start doing some final wiring and putting together the internals for the first saber I'm going to be building. So we're getting really, really close. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you kind of the design I decided I'm going to go with these sabers, and explain exactly what I'm thinking about and why I chose the pieces that I did. So let's check it out. Alright, so here we go. This is the look at the final layout for the guts of these sabers. This is what I've decided to go with after quite a bit of work and agonizing and trying to decide on which parts to use. And funnily enough, I've really gone back to basics. I've gone back to where I started. I'm using the micro puck again. Now, it's not the same micro puck I was using. That's right over here, this little guy. That's the original micro puck. Now, it's a 350 milliamp output micro puck. I ordered a new one. It's the same device, but it's rated for 500 milliamps, so half an amp. It's going to put out a little bit more power and hopefully give me just a little bit more brightness. There's another piece in here that's more important for brightness, though, and it's inside of this little guy, and that is the optics. So reading around and understanding optics a little bit better, you know, I was working with triple LEDs, which, yeah, they're putting out a lot more light, but they have really wide beams, very wide. This little guy, these smaller optics here, actually are pretty narrow. This one, I believe, is an 8.2 degree beam, something like that, but very, very narrow compared to the wide ones, and that's really important for these sabers because you want to point as much light down the blade as you possibly can. That was what was happening with these triple LEDs. I was just losing all the light out to the sides, and it does actually, surprisingly enough, make a huge difference. I'm going to put that back on here, though, and close it up. Well, actually, before I do that, I'll show you. The LED there, the star LED like we've been using, is sitting on this little guy. The wires are running through it. I decided to go with one of these enclosure heatsink setups. I was really wary of it. I wanted to avoid it if I could because they're expensive. They're machined metal. This one is the cheapest one I could find. Actually, it's on LED Supply. It's $9, and it gets the job done for sure. I decided to go with it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it keeps everything contained and tight and looking good. It's also going to take care of the heat. This is actually functions as a heat sink. I'm going to attach the LED to it with thermal paste. This setup doesn't put out a massive amount of heat, but there was enough there to where I was a little concerned with running this for 3 hours straight. I didn't want to try risk damaging the light or anything like that. So I decided to go ahead and invest in the setup and just eat that cost. So the emitter, or the emitter housing, I should say, like I said, is about $9, as is the driver, the micro puck. But seals back up like that, and I'll seal it closed, and works really nicely. Gives you a spot there to attach the wires. I'll have to redo all of that, like I said, once I actually do the final assembly. The LED inside there, and I didn't actually point it out, is one of these little guys. I ordered a bunch of them, so they come all stuck together. You have to break them apart. This is the Cree X-Lamp XPE2, XPE2. This is the same model of LED that I found for sale on Custom Saber Shop. So this is one that a lot of people use when they're building their own sabers at home. Nice brightness, and I actually ordered a couple of colored ones, which I might show you guys later on. Decided to try a pre-colored LED rather than filters. And they're nice. They put out really good color, but it's not quite the color I need for this project. So these are all pure white. I'm going back to white, and I'm going to use color filtering on this project as well, which I actually don't have any here, but I'll show them to you later when we do assembly. So, feeding into all this is going to be 2 AA batteries. That's kind of part of the reason I decided to stick with the micropuck versus the buckpuck. The buckpuck has a minimum, I believe, of 8 volts of input, so you have to have a lot of voltage going in. To get that, either I'm going to have to use 9 volts or lithium batteries that have a higher voltage rating, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. And the nice thing about the micropuck is it's actually maximum 3 volts, so 2 AA's, that's all that it'll take, and it works great. Puts out plenty of brightness. Alright, so now that we've talked about all the pieces, the battery, the driver, the LED inside, the housing, the optics, I'm going to actually turn it on and show you how it works. So, clicking the little button here, there we go. Nice and bright. I'm not going to point it directly at the camera, but definitely getting the job done to a certain extent. But the optics are the real key here. They're the real star. They're going to focus all that light down the blade versus letting it go all over the place. The other thing that I found through experimentation and through the help of my friend who owns an Ultra Saber is the blade itself. So I had my blades that I had ordered. Excuse me. I played around with the lining on the inside, the refracting material. I just couldn't get a good brightness out of it through all my experimenting. Once I got a hold of an Ultra Saber, I was actually able to take the blade out of it and put my blade into the Ultra Saber and see how it looks, put my LED setup onto the Ultra Saber blade, and I found a massive difference. So I'm going to show it to you. This is actually an Ultra Saber blade. This is from an Initiate Saber, so it's a little guy here. But this is on loan from my friend. Put it over the top, and you get a beautiful, consistent color all the way down. Nice, bright light. It looks really, really good, and in fact, I'll show you. Let me switch this off while I reach over here. I'll grab my blade. This is the white polycarbonate blade that we were using with some wrapping down it. Switch this back on, and whoops, there comes the wrapping. And there you go. And actually, if you see all the way down towards the end, it starts to get fairly dim. I don't know how clear that is on the camera, but here in person, doesn't look nearly as nice. Not as consistent, not as bright. You can see the wrapping on the inside quite a lot. So what I've decided to go with is a higher quality, well, at least a professionally done, I should say, blade, because the color, the brightness is just better. I actually have some of these on order. They're on the way, and I'll do a video with them once they arrive. But the combination of the more focused optics, the nicer blade, and really focusing this project in, I'm liking the color output I'm getting. It's going to be just right for the project. So I want to talk about one more aspect of this project, and it's going to give you another reason why I decided to go with this setup that I'm going to use going forward. Let me switch off my lamp really quick, and I'll switch the light back on. There we go. So this is the Ultra Saber with my setup. Now, what I discovered when I actually had an Ultra Saber in hand, and not the Initiate Saber that this blade came from, the little guy, but a full-on big Ultra Saber with a ton of energy, a ton of power, very, very bright. We had this in hand and gave it to the person who I'm making one of these sabers for. She was in her costume, which has a lot of green on it. The lightsaber was green. Hey, that works great. Holding that bright, bright lightsaber, giving off this huge green glow, it actually washed out her costume. It overwhelmed, even in the light, even with lights on, not even in the dark. It was almost ruining her costume in a certain way. It was beautiful because the glow is amazing, but I didn't want to overwhelm, like I said, the rest of the color of her costume with that light. So I decided actually to dial back a little bit on the brightness. That's what I've been doing this whole time, is chasing brightness. It's not bright enough. It's not bright enough. What I found is, using the right optics and the right blade, this is all the brightness I really want. I don't need a whole lot of power out of this. I just need it to glow nicely in the light. It needs to look good on the con floor without blinding everybody, without overwhelming the costume. So that was kind of the final the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were, that made me decide to go with this setup with using the lower powered micro puck, was seeing that overwhelming brightness from that super bright Ultra Saber. So going forward, one of these days I probably will want to build one of these for myself, and I'll probably want it to be super bright, so I might go back on that, add some different components. But for this project now, this is definitely the setup that I'm going to go forward with. So let's do a quick price rundown on this stuff. So I'm going to set the blade aside because this is not the actual blade I'm going to be using. I do have blades on the way, and when they get here I'll talk a little bit about pricing on those. But for now, the setup. So the driver itself, the micro puck, is $9. The housing that the LED is in is $9. The LED itself was $3.50. So what is that up to? 20-some dollars. The optics, both the holder and the lens, are another couple of dollars. We'll give another couple of dollars for the wiring, for the batteries, for the battery holder, all that stuff. So we're really right around $25 to $30 for all this stuff, for this setup here so far. That's a little bit more than half the budget, but I decided that's going to be acceptable, I think, for the project. That gives us about $20 to spend on the hilt. I think we're probably going to end up going over, but we're going to see. That's kind of my next step once I get all this together and I'm happy with it, is putting it all into that hilt, making the hilt look good. But that'll be a video for another day. For now, thanks for joining me, looking at the kind of the final setup here. I'm going to get started on putting all this together, and we'll see you next time on building lightsabers.